don't really know. I was kind of hoping for some time to myself, to think things over. I have a lot on my mind at the moment. You could get that, can't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Benjamin. Sorry to be like this, but I don't want to do it alone. Don't you like filming with me?
Mrs. Robinson, can't you just put the equipment away and go to bed?
I'm very neurotic.
Mrs. Robinson, if you don't mind me saying so, this conversation's getting a little strange.
Well, how do you mean?
Well, you know.
Well, I don't know.
For God's sakes, Mrs. Robinson, you've pulled out all the equipment, the cameras.
So?
You're telling me that Mr. Robinson won't be home for a few hours?
And?
Mrs. Robinson, I think you're trying to seduce me.
Welcome back to another episode of Elephant Den. It's Ashley.
And Alex.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing the film. It's a 56-year-old film from 1967 called The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols. And it stars Dustin Hoffman as the main character, Benjamin.
And Bancroft.
And Bancroft.
As Mrs. Robinson.
And Catherine Ross, who plays Elaine Robinson, which is the daughter.
The film is about Benjamin. He's a young man who's just come back from college. He's going to be staying with his parents in Los Angeles over the course of the summer months. Mm-hmm. Immediately from the establishing shots and, the soundtrack from Simon and Garfunkel, we hear that great track, Sound of Silence.
Great song.
We know that Benjamin is lonely, lost, and kind of in that in-between stage in life where he doesn't know what he's going to do next. Many of us can relate to that, whether it's in between school or, your future job, maybe coming back to stay with the parents.
It's almost like you have that freedom all of a sudden to do whatever you want, and then it's like you don't have your parents to make the choices for you anymore, so you're kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah, you come back to live with them for some time, and it's a strange dynamic. But this film is famous for introducing or kind of flipping the switch on promiscuous sex being instigated by an older woman towards a younger man. At the time, Dustin Hoffman was 30, where Mrs. Robinson, actress,
she was only like 36.
And Bancroft was 36.
Yeah.
We're talking the 60s, so it's the Beatles Renaissance, and Dustin Hoffman has that haircut going, that kind of nerdy but kind of new rock and roll hip young kid that look was popular at the time.
Okay, so this is a perfect leadway into our first impressions because for both of us, our first impressions were quite different. Mm-hmm. For me, I found it to be a little outdated in terms of the style, but for you, it didn't seem to bother you in that sense. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of understand Ashley's point with it being some things a little dated, whether it's, I found the script to be a little off in some parts, or at least Dustin Hoffman. His character is trying to be very assertive towards the adults he's surrounded by, especially near the beginning where Mrs. Robinson is trying to seduce him, and he's very standoffish. Dustin Hoffman is almost firing out his lines, but in the same scenes, he'd have great moments where his impulse is to automatically nod his head or wave his hands to move away cigarette smoke, it preceded any method of him trying to act as a overconfident, assertive college kid.
The style of acting is definitely different.
Way different from what we have these days. Anne Bancroft's performance here is just sublime. Even though she's kind of played as the more villainous archetype near the end, she's completely magnetic in the start of the film. And the kind of midlife crisis both the main characters are going through, it makes their desperation and wrongful choices kind of unsympathetic, but in the same stroke, very common and human. And then as far as like the transition shots, I really liked most of the stylistic choices with that. Once him and Mrs. Robinson hook up, it kind of, the editing kind of fast forwards through the summer, and there's some great transition shots of him, you know, leaping out of the pool, and it's edited to where he's leaping into the bed with her again, and it just shows this.
But then he's like lying down back onto the pool again.
And then it's, yes. And it's that where it's a great way to showcase the time passing and just this loop he's caught in. For a lot of young men, it could be that, you know, that perfect summer fantasy of just spending the summer with an older woman, a beautiful older woman. Mm-hmm. The film doesn't say, okay, this is a rich family, but you understand from seeing it, right?
Right.
And you made a really good point about the scuba suit, which explain that scene, because it's a great scene, I think. Yeah,
so there's a scene in the film where it shows Benjamin in a scuba suit, which obviously we could see it is a little outdated in the sense of how it looks like compared to what a scuba suit looks like now. But his parents are encouraging him to go try the scuba suit and to show it to all their friends that are there at the house in their backyard at the pool.
Yeah.
And they're like, come on, come out, show it. And the dad's kind of just saying, like, it's this new thing, it's expensive, let's not even go there about the price. But yeah, like, only rich people could afford that, right? And so in the sense that you understand that this family is a very well-off family, that this dad could afford it, and he wants to show it off to his friends.
Yeah, rather than going to, because they're in California, there's probably a nearby, you know, beach. But instead, let's just throw him in the pool. We were a little confused as to what's going on? Yeah. Why is he putting him in the pool? Audiences our age and younger could have that confusion because it was more obvious at that time, 56 years ago,
to understand
that like, oh, this is a, you know, new exclusive thing.
It does have good symbolism.
Oh yeah. Well, it has the POV shot of like looking through the goggles and all the sound is cut out because he has the full suit on, and so you just he hears his own breathing and everyone's, you know, in his face talking to him, but he can't hear them, and he's just, again, once he goes in the water, it's like similar to near the opening where he's like distorted in the fish tank. He's submerged in water again. He's getting suffocated, and you do get that feeling from it. Did you feel that way as a kid? I know I did.
Suffocated?
You know, parents are asking you, what are you going to do? You're going to be stuck doing this forever. And it's like, my whole life is ahead of me. I can't, I need time to think.
It's almost like your parents are not letting you breathe.
Yeah.
Not that, like...
And I don't, like, I think it's so common.
I'm sure, like, everyone has a similar story and understanding, like, you could feel pressured by the people around you to be a certain way or to live a certain way, or... They have expectations for you because they love you, and you know that, right?
Yeah, no, that's what it is. But I know I was the same age, 22, and it's when I came back, I lived abroad for a year, and then I came back and stayed with my parents, and I had no prospects, right?
Right.
I didn't even have a degree.
Yeah.
So they were really like, what are you gonna, you know, you're gonna work, you know, hard labor forever?
Right. When you, like, take a step back and you learn this information on the side, you do start to change your perspective because you realize a deeper level to the story. My first impression was that it took me out of it, and I didn't like that. Mm-hmm. When a film does that for me, I'm always like, oh, I don't know if I like this film, because it takes me out too much, and that means that I can't escape into this new world, and just live that moment. But I do appreciate the techniques that they used, and and for that time being like the pioneer of, you know, a film about a cougar.
Right.
And a young boy, and you could see that it's comedic, it's funny, it's entertaining.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The movie didn't hold up very well for me, and I think it may have something to do with the nature of topical humor. A topical joke needs to be told at the time when it's topical. I wrote at the time and remembered what 1967, 68, and 69 were really like. I realized that it resonated in a different way then, and now looking at it, I feel that Mrs. Robinson holds up very well. I thought Mrs. Robinson looked more attractive to me than her daughter in this movie, frankly. Apart from that, I feel that the satire really is of its time.
I wanted to talk about the soundtrack.
Okay.
Simon and Garfunkel. You know, they're a folk rock duo.
That was
very
another,
famous.
yeah, sorry I know you're going to get into this, but that was another thing that I was kind of like, why are they repeating the same song?
Well, so, you know, the songs are great.
They're great. I love them.
Most of them already existed by the time they were editing the film. They were using it for pacing at first, but then they realized, okay, this is great. They're going to keep it in.
It works.
And they asked Simon to produce some more music for the film, and he didn't have time. He was touring a lot at the time, and what he ended up doing was showing the producers a track which was initially, he said, it's not about the modern times, it's about Mrs. Roosevelt. The producer said, no, it's no longer, it's about Mrs. Robinson. It's no longer about Mrs. Roosevelt. So that song, they kind of changed it and it became Mrs. Robinson.
Interesting.
But what I found funny was kind of what you, I think, are alluding to, how they used the song Scarborough Fair, how there's this moment where, or this sequence where Dustin Hoffman's character, okay, he's found Elaine Robinson, the daughter of Mrs. Robinson, and between, you know, his parents and Mr. Robinson, they organize them to go out on a date, right?
Yeah.
They think they'll hit it off, and Mrs. Robinson is not for that, but obviously they want to keep their affair, you know, quiet. So he goes on the date, he falls for her, so he thinks, and he goes to chase her at school. And in that sequence where he's driving and traveling, they replay Scarborough Fair, and it's the same, like, it's the chorus, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of, they did like 3 or 4 times.
It felt like repetitive.
It felt a little repetitive and choppy, and that's like another example of a moment where it kind of took me out, and I don't know if it worked or works anymore.
Yeah, also with the music, the Simon Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel. I found that I was quite surprised, actually, that the movie used songs with lyrics in them. For example, those videos we see of like couples on vacation and they add like a song that has lyrics in it, and so it's kind of just like that music video you're watching. This movie felt like, yeah, you're watching a music video.
Does it feel a little cheap to you?
I don't want to say cheap. But yeah, in that sense, it was like, yeah, I'm watching a music video right now instead of a film. And that's just how I felt with that.
I wonder what, because I grew up on Simon and Garfunkel. Obviously, they're way before my other time. No, and I know that's what you're saying. I know you're not saying otherwise. It just, I wonder how, you know, fresh, younger audiences who maybe haven't heard this music at all before, because it has nostalgia to me, right?
Yeah.
I remember listening to that car driving home in the dark. You know, being in the backseat, just sitting there and like really feeling it, and it resonates, that kind of, that loneliness. It's playing side by side with the imagery of Benjamin, who's also alone, right? And kind of in his own bubble. I think the soundtrack is such a great representation of that.
Okay, let's go into the ending of the film, because I think that I think for me personally, this is what makes it timeless. This ending.
Right. It was a very good decision. It was a very good decision that what they did.
Yeah, because it wasn't a happy ending.
No.
Or you could think of it as a happy ending. It just depends on how you want to perceive it. But
and I love that all it took was to hold the camera.
On them.
That's it.
Yeah, and to watch their. Okay, so before we go into it, the ending, pretty much, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this movie, stop watching and go watch it. It ends with Dustin Hoffman Benjamin running after Elaine and finding her, looking for her everywhere, and because he realizes he loves her and he wants to be with her. And he finally finds her, and she's getting married. And she's at the altar with another guy. And he's banging on the window, and he's like, Elaine, Elaine!
Yeah, he interrupts the wedding.
And you've got the parents, and they're just like, no! And they don't want this. They don't want Benjamin to be there.
Chaos ensues.
It's chaos, yeah. And he ends up stealing the bride, and it's a runaway bride, and they get onto the school bus. I don't know why there's a school bus.
Or community bus or something, because there was adults on it.
Yeah, and they're running, and they sit at the back, and they're just laughing, and they have this high, and it's like this ecstasy.
Yeah.
And the camera holds onto their faces. And this is what makes it interesting, is you see that high end, and it's just them, and they're kind of just back to that beginning.
Right.
Dustin Hoffman's face of what next?
Yeah, exactly. They're contemplating the future, what they just did. Was it rash? It was rash. And it's, again...
That's what makes it a masterpiece.
It almost seems like it wasn't even a direction that they knew that they were taking it. It just seemed like, okay, act out, you're super excited, and then they didn't even tell them they were going to leave it on them for a bit, right? But it works so well. It seems like natural that that ecstasy, you said, diminishes, and they're just like, what did we just do?
Right.
And then the film ends, and it's great.
And they're not smiling anymore. Their smiles are gone, and they're just sitting on this bus, and it's just like, she's in a gown. And I love movies that hold on to a moment, because the beautiful thing about film is you can take out those ugly moments of real life, right? And there's a film that I think of every time I think of this. It's Hereditary by Ari Aster, when the moment of
the big
accident, and that camera stays on his face, and that's what creeped me out the most,
I think,
because it felt so real life, because those are the real life moments, right? And that's why I love that this film did that with keeping their faces, because they showed the real life moment of the truth,
right?
You know, because after that high of being like, oh yeah, we ran away, like I took the bride,
the reality sets in.
That's the reality.
It's not a film anymore. Just to clarify, in the Hereditary, you're talking about the sequence after the accident. The son comes home.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm talking about the sequence after.
And, yes, it's just the shot of the son, but you hear the mom's reaction, right?
Yeah, but it was mostly after the... No, like,
he pulls over.
After the accident,
he pulls over. And he's, like, hesitant to watch the... Right.
And you're just watching his face.
He's hesitant to look into the rear view
mirror. Exactly. And it's that moment for me that creeped me out the most, because it didn't take it, I was like, get me out of that moment. Get me out of the moment, because I don't want to be there.
It made you so uncomfortable. Yeah, truly frightening stuff.
So let me ask the real question, Alexander.
Yes.
Did The Graduate age as well as Mrs. Robinson?
I really think so. I think is it super rewatchable? I don't know. It's like, I guess in that sense, I enjoyed it for the one watch, right? That like really cathartic ending. I really enjoyed the cuts, whether it was the transitions or the perspective of Benjamin, where like sometimes you're uncomfortably close to him and he's just like constricted, to other moments where it pulls way back and he's like he becomes super inferior. And when Mrs. Robinson, when the truth gets spilled, right, when she kind of really becomes a villain, and she, what does she say? She pretends that he raped her.
Yeah, it's almost
right.
Yeah, he makes.
And there's a shot of like her in the corner, and he's so distant, and it feels like everything is just far from him, including Elaine. I like very smart choices.
I agree.
The soundtrack is timeless. How they use it, okay, it could be up for debate, like we mentioned, but overall, I really liked it.
Yeah.
And yourself?
Thank you. I was like, is he gonna ask me? Yeah, definitely. I do think Mrs. Robinson aged very well. She looks really good, even in today's day and age. I thought she looked really good.
Yeah.
But in that sense, like, yeah, there was obviously some things that took me out, like the style and whatnot. But for that reason, I like that. It's almost like it's a time machine. It takes you back into the 60s, and you get to see that world for what it is, and so in that sense, I appreciate it. And yeah, I like the director's choices and the cinematography, the cuts and the transitions. All those things were pretty creative. Like I loved it all, but it did take me out, and so. For that reason, I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie, but I do think it is worth the watch. It's really great. And just for that ending, I will say it is a timeless piece.
Would you, I think we could both agree it's very hard for a film to warrant a remake.
Yeah.
Do you think this movie would benefit from a remake?
It's a hard question because it would be really cool to see this story take place in the modern day, like right now, but there's something for me where I like things to be left untouched.
Me too.
And so for that reason, I want to say, like, let's just leave it untouched and let's leave The Graduate as it is.
99% of the time.
Yeah, most of the time it gets ruined, and I feel like if someone of today's day and age were to direct and put that movie together, it wouldn't be as good.
The chances that they find the right people to do it are very slim, and there's a potential that because it's the modern day, they could do a few interesting things with that.
Yeah.
Because these relationships, these dynamics can be happening at any time.
Exactly.
But would it warrant
actually,
a remake? I don't know.
Speaking of like today's day and age and being politically correct, do you think they'd allow a cougar role in films today?
Yeah, that's a very valid point you're making.
It's a little unfortunate, but yeah.
It's very unfortunate. And the fact that they probably wouldn't use Simon and Garfunkel, which I want to keep it. I love those. I love that score, the soundtrack.
Let's leave The Graduate untouched. Yeah, don't make a remake. No. Just leave it as is, because it is really good.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched it, go watch it right now. That's everything we have for today. Thank you so much again for watching. As always, we appreciate your views and your likes. If you liked this video and you're not subscribed, please click on the subscribe button and click the bell for notifications and tell your friends about us.
Thank you so much for watching. You could like the video down below, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. We'd love to hear from you on the comments as well.
Yeah, and if you like what we're doing and you want to follow us for updates and more information, check us out on Instagram. Our Instagram account is called @AshleyandAlex. We also have
Letterboxd. It's a non-sponsor, but an app we love to use. It's a way for film lovers to organize their movie watching experience. So you can make a watch list of films you have yet to watch, movies you have seen, and if you want to rate them or write a critique about them, you could see other people's ratings and lists.
It's really cool.
It's a great way, again, to organize your movie watching experience, and we highly recommend using it. You can follow us there. The link for that is down below. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
much. It was a pleasure.
You're awesome.